how to get ready for AI in your organization, SAP's doubling down on agentic AI, and why your employees secretly hate change. Those are just a few of the topics we'll cover here in episode 223 of Transformation Ground Control.
Welcome to Transformation Ground Control. Ground Control. The podcast that covers everything related to digital transformation. This podcast features technology agnostic and international discussions related to digital strategy, software selection, implementation, change management, business process optimization, and everything else you need to know to make your digital transformation project successful. Whether you're embarking on an ERP implementation, supply chain transformation, or any other business or digital transformation, this podcast is for you. Now, here's your host, Eric Kimberling.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Ground control to Major Tom.
Hello, and welcome to Transformation Ground Control, the podcast that's tech agnostic and covers everything related to digital transformation, including the people, process, technology, and strategy sides of change. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent and tech agnostic consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital and business transformations. And joining me, as always, is our co-host, Darian Chwialkowski. Darian, thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We've got an exciting show for you here today. We've got a lot of topics we're going to cover. First of all, we'll get into our social media questions from our audience members, and we'll answer those questions. And then we'll get into the newsworthy topics. We've got a couple of them here. One is how SAP is doubling down on agentic AI at Sapphire 2025. We'll talk about the new news behind their agentic AI efforts at SAP. And we'll also get into the other newsworthy topic will be how the U.S. and United Arab Emirates are launching an ambitious AI mega project. So we'll learn more about that as well. And then later in the show, we'll have our first guest, Khalid, who's a director of data and AI strategy at Third Stage Consulting. He's going to be on the show to talk about AI readiness and how to get your organization, your people, your processes, and your technology all ready for AI and how to get started on your AI journey if you haven't already. And then finally, later in the show, we'll talk about why your employees secretly hate change. Despite what they might tell you, despite what you think, your employees do not want to change. And we're going to talk about why that is and what you can do about it and how you can get to the bottom of that. We'll get to all that here later in today's episode. But first, before we jump into the audience questions, a couple quick reminders. This podcast is released every Wednesday. You can get new episodes. You can also see all the past episodes or watch all the past episodes at transformationgroundcontrol.com. So be sure to check that out if you'd like to see all the past episodes you might have missed. And secondly, the show is produced by Major Tom Productions and sponsored by Third Stage Consulting. So if you'd like to learn more about either organization, I've included contact information below. If you'd like to learn more about how Third Stage Consulting can help with your digital transformation journey, you can contact me. And I've included contact information if you'd like to sponsor our content through Major Tom Productions. I've included contact information below there as well. So all that being said, let's jump into the social media questions. What do you have in store for us here this week, Darian?
Yeah, we have some good questions today. This first one is about this, or on YouTube. It was the video that is Odoo right for you. And the comment is, how does it compare to Zoho? I think that's how you say it. Correct me if I'm wrong. Zoho inventory, specifically for an inventory use only or inventory only use case.
Well, for inventory only, Odoo is more of a full-blown ERP system that can do financials and accounting and inventory management, warehouse management, even some manufacturing, e-commerce, et cetera. Whereas Zoho is more CRM focused with some inventory management capabilities. So I would say, generally speaking, just very high level, Odoo is going to be stronger in inventory management. But when it comes to CRM, if you're looking for more the sales automation and sort of your traditional CRM capabilities, Zoho is built for that. And so depending on if you're leading with sales and that's your most important priority, Zoho might be a better fit. But if you're leading with inventory management and more of the supply chain type stuff, then Odoo is probably going to be a better fit. And Odoo does have a CRM module as well, so it can do CRM. It's not going to be quite as robust as what Zoho can do, but it might be good enough if what you're really looking for is inventory management. So depending on your priorities, they're two good systems, or they're both up and coming high growth sorts of vendors that are doing really well in the space. So you can't really go wrong. I think they're both good vendors, but they've got distinctly different strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah, absolutely. Great answer there. Good comparison. This next question is from the lessons from 200 plus digital experts on YouTube. This question says, Eric, you forgot the biggest lesson: secure a serious budget and some contingency. And most important, how do we deal with the project when we are not meeting schedule, with a bunch of question marks? Ultimately, it is about the core principles of project management: scope, schedule, budget, and quality. The ERP vendors are excellent for talking the hype and walking mediocrity.
Yeah, that's a great question. So getting the project controls and risk mitigation controls in place is really important for sure. And I think the video talks more. Well, first of all, the video, just to add some context, the video talks about the top 10 things as analyzed by AI. So I did a deep research analysis of all the past episodes of this show and every guest we ever had on it. And I asked it to take all that content, all those guests, all the feedback and knowledge that they shared, and give me a top 10 ranking based on all 220 plus interviews. So AI was the one that came up with the list. To be fair, I just sort of summarized what AI told me, and tried to build on it a little bit. So, I do think project management is very important. Risk mitigation is very important. I think the key, though, is knowing the top 10 things that we talk about in that video. Knowing what those risks are will allow you to do a better job at project management and risk mitigation. So I don't want it to be dismissive of the whole project management function, but I think project management, the science of project management, the Gantt charts and the resource tracking and the check mark, the checking the box, did we do A, B, or C, and did we get it done on time? That's all important, but the more important part is not just did we or didn't we accomplish a goal or a deliverable on time and on budget, but it's also the art dimension of it to add to the science, which is, did we do it well? Does it fit industry standard? Does it fit the business that we're trying to enable, or the business change that we're trying to enable? And that's the piece that I think a lot of project managers, traditional project managers especially, they miss that because they're used to the science of project management. They don't necessarily understand the artistic or the nuances of digital transformation from having done it so many times. So I think you need both, but I think the key is to recognize what those other risks are and be aware of them so that you can do a better job as a project manager.
Yeah, absolutely. Super interesting stuff. And speaking of AI, I know we had some AI questions, and we're going to get more into AI later today. This first newsworthy article today is about SAP and how they're doubling down on agentic AI at Sapphire 2025, which we kind of had a recent episode about Epicor and actually kind of heard the same thing from them when they had their big conference. So it's interesting. I wonder if we'll continue to see this trend as all the big conferences happen. But this was in Orlando. SAP made a significant commitment to agentic AI, unveiling a suite of innovations aimed at transferring enterprise applications. Central to this announcement is the introduction of the AI Foundation, described as the AI operating system for SAP Business AI. This platform integrates Gen AI Hub, Joule Studio, and SAP Knowledge Graph, providing developers with tools to build, extend, and run custom AI solutions at scale. A standout feature, according to this article, is the Joule Copilot. This is an omnipresent assistant designed to support users across various SAP applications. Joule kind of acts as a conductor, orchestrating multiple AI agents specializing in different business functions to collaboratively accomplish complex workflows. And lastly, SAP's approach emphasizes a clean core strategy, integrating acquisitions. How do you say that word?
Acquisition.
Yeah, okay, I got it right. Integrating acquisitions like LenIX and WalkMe to enhance its AI ecosystem. The AI Hub, leveraging technology from LenIX, offers centralized inventory and governance for AI agents, enabling businesses to map out AI capabilities for their operations effectively. So I know that was kind of a lot, but some follow-up questions for you for this, Eric. How does SAP's AI Foundation compare to other enterprise AI platforms in terms of scalability and integration?
Well, I think SAP has an advantage in the whole AI front, largely because they have so many different tools that they've acquired and developed organically over the years. But perhaps even more importantly, the fact that they have such scale with the clients that they work with. And the reason that's important for AI purposes is you look at not only the R&D dollars that SAP has at its disposal now to reinvest and to continue innovation within the AI space. That's part of it. But the other part of it is that the customers are so big with such large volumes of data that are opting into training the SAP AI models that it's just going to benefit customers across the board. Now, there's questions I have around whether or not that's a good idea for organizations to share all that information to train IP that is not theirs, but make it, you're basically training and furthering the development of AI models that SAP owns that'll allow SAP to make more money, presumably to go sell that same AI tool set to other companies. So that's a whole nother conversation for another day. But from SAP's perspective, they're at a really good spot competitively because they have access to large customers, they have access to large R&D dollars, and they've got access to large data sets from those large customers that will allow it to do AI better in the long term. And I think that's going to be interesting to watch, is how these big mega vendors like SAP and Microsoft and Oracle and some of these other big enterprise tech vendors, I'll be curious to see how they compete longer term, because they might be able to drown out some of the startups and the smaller AI providers because of their size and scale and the advantage they have with that access to data that other AI providers might not. So on one hand, AI has opened up a ton of competition, a ton of options in the marketplace, but on the other hand, it's highly fragmented right now. And I'm curious to see how it shakes out in terms of the big vendors potentially having the upper hand. I hope that doesn't happen, because I think it's good to have options. I think it's good to have less vendor lock. I think is generally a good thing, but strategically, if you're SAP, yeah, let's get in on this AI thing. Let's further lock in our customers to make switching costs higher, and it's going to be more predictable revenue and profit for them longer term. Great for their business, but I question whether or not that's really good for the industry and for the customers longer term.
For sure. And that kind of answers this next question in a way too, but I'm going to kind of flip it and ask, what are some potential benefits potentially that, deploying an omnipresent AI assistant like Joule, even though they may not own the IP address and stuff, what could that benefit, different enterprise applications?
You think of all the data that SAP is able to build into its AI models. Think about something like production planning for manufacturing. A manufacturer has to figure out what customer demand is going to be, or what they think it's going to be, so that then they can back up from there and figure out, what do I need to produce and buy when? And then you back up from there to figure out what raw materials do I need to buy and when. So that planning process is really important, and it's always been a thorn in the side of a lot of manufacturers. It's just been very difficult for companies to accurately predict demand, accurately predict all the manufacturing and raw material procurement that needs to happen leading up to satisfying that demand. And there's just so many variables that are prone to inaccuracies and human biases, human errors, and things like that. So now if you're using an SAP and you've got, in their case, I think it's 30,000, or it's probably more now, but last I heard they had 30,000 of their customers had opted into training the AI models. In other words, they opted in or gave SAP permission to access the data in their systems, in their instance of the software, to train the SAP AI model. So if I'm a customer of SAP, now all of a sudden I've got tons of data from 30,000 or tens of thousands of other companies that are training the AI model to make it better. It's not going to be perfect, but it's probably going to be a lot better than anything I've had before. So now when I do production planning, it's considering not just my own internal data, it's considering all the data that SAP has amassed through all of its customers and all the supply chains that it works with, to give me presumably more accurate predictions on how, what customer demand is going to be, what my production planning and schedule needs to look like, things like that. So I think that's where the value is. And that's just one example of many that I could give you as far as how AI could do that and how SAP in particular could give you more of an advantage. And I know I can be hard on SAP sometimes in stuff I publish on LinkedIn and YouTube and whatnot, but at the end of the day, SAP is done a good job. Obviously, they're the number one ERP system for a reason, and I think they're doing a pretty good job navigating this whole AI thing too. I think they've got, they're taking advantage of their strengths. They're taking advantage of the fact that they have these big, massive customers that others don't have. Their rivals don't have that same customer base, so they're using it to their advantage. And I think that's a good move strategically. If I'm an investor in SAP, which I'm not, but if I were, I would think that's a great thing, and I'd be super excited about it. But again, longer term, my question is this going to be good for customers, or is it going to water down all the competitive advantages that have been built over time? Or does it just force them to go find another competitive advantage? If they're going to all use SAP and have the same vanilla software they're using, clean core, trained AI data sets, all that stuff, it sort of diminishes to some degree some of the competitive advantage that different companies might have in the same industry or across industries. So then the question is, well, what's their competitive advantage going to be if it's not going to be the technology they're using? So those are some thoughts. There are some trade-offs or considerations for sure.
For sure. And to kind of build on this too, what role does transparency play in building trust with AI-driven decision-making processes within organizations?
Well, I think, validating data and decisions that are coming from AI and being transparent about where those data sets and decisions or recommendations came from is important. But I think, even more important than the transparency is just adding the human layer back to the AI data and the analysis and things like that. So it's part transparency, but I think it's also just part getting the right recipe, the right mix of AI automation and AI analysis, and AI doing a lot of the work, but what's the human mix of that recipe? And I think that's where a lot of companies are struggling, is trying to navigate that piece of it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Absolutely. Kind of switching gears away from SAP though, we're going to talk more about US and UAE and how they are launching another AI topic, I know, but they're launching this ambitious AI mega project is what they're calling it. So
sounds big.
Sorry?
It sounds big.
Yeah, it's a mega project. So So the US and United Arab Emirates have announced a collaborative effort to construct a massive AI campus in Dubai, spanning over 10 square miles. This facility is poised to become the largest AI hub outside of the US, aiming to accelerate innovation across sectors like finance, energy, and healthcare. A notable aspect of this project is UAE's access to approximately 500,000 NVIDIA H100 chips annually. These chips are critical for training advanced AI models and were previously restricted under the previous administration. The easing of the export controls marks a significant policy shift aimed at bolstering the U.S. influence in a global AI development. The AI campus will also feature a dedicated science park to foster research and development, with a focus on creating region-specific large language models and AI solutions tailored to the Gulf Cooperation Council, otherwise known as GCC, and those countries. So definitely something that is super interesting. Another note I want to make is key players include Emirati firm G42 and the US tech giants such as like Amazon Web Services. So definitely have a good mix of different players in there that we talk about on this podcast often. But Eric, for you, how does this US UAE collaboration reshape kind of like the global overall look at the AI landscape, particularly relating to other countries, developments in AI?
Yeah, I know China is investing heavily in AI as well, and they've got their DeepSeek tool that allegedly can do more for less money. So there's a lot of competition, obviously, and it's sort of like a nuclear arms race of sorts for these different countries to get in on the AI movement. I think it's interesting that that the U.S. is partnering with UAE, given the recent, tariffs and trade wars and some of the, kind of the general populist movement and the nationalist movement in the U.S. has sort of caused the U.S. and some other countries too are sort of turning more inward and sort of stepping away or stepping back from global trade and global partnerships and things like that, at least compared to the recent past. So that is interesting, though, that this is sort of running counter to that recent movement. But I think it also goes to show, the importance of scale and collaboration and cooperation in the AI space. Now, I guess the bigger question, though, is going to be, the intellectual property and security and just legal issues. How does that get all sorted out? When you're dealing with two different companies, two different countries, two different court systems, two different legal systems, all that stuff. I mean, I imagine that could get messy at some point in the future. But at least on paper, it sounds good. Getting a few countries together to invest in this sort of infrastructure is better than one, and I imagine they can do more. But there's probably a lot of details behind the scenes that we don't know about that are very sticky to work out.
Yeah, absolutely. And to kind of go on that side of things, if I guess you were implementing the different measures that should be taken to ensure ethical AI development within this mega project, what would you suggest?
The ethical development of the mega project?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, I think, depending on what part of ethics you're talking, I mean, if you're talking about data privacy and intellectual property, I think just having clarity around what laws apply is going to be really important. So is it U.S. law? Is it UAE law? I don't think you can have a combination of both, just because I think the court systems are so different from what I understand. I don't know a lot about UAE law, so don't quote me on this, but I understand, from what I understand, they're quite a bit different. So I think that is going to be important. And then I guess, when you think about, and by the way, the legal stuff has to do a lot with privacy and intellectual property. But then, one thing that I've been reading a bit about, it's not a huge topic that I see a lot, but it does occasionally pop up in some of these articles or some of the research around what's happening with AI, is just the, sort of the environmental impact. And I know the US is probably a little more focused on green initiatives and ESG type stuff. I know Europe is very much in that, going that direction, is in the EU with their ESG regulations going into effect as we speak. So, the reason I bring that up is if that dimension or lens of ethics is what you're referring to, that's the one where I'd have more questions, because I don't think the UAE and the Gulf countries in general are as focused on green stuff as the U.S., but I could be wrong on that. I mean, I think that's changing, but that's my understanding or my impression. Be curious to hear from the audience, especially those that are joining from the Middle East. If you agree or disagree with that statement, or if I'm off base, I'd love to hear your feedback. But I think that's another thing, is when you talk about these big mega projects, you talked about 10 square miles of presumably massive data centers that are consuming a ton of energy. And I think that's why the Middle East is so interested in AI, not only because it's such a booming area, but also because they have the natural resources of energy that a lot of the world doesn't. So it kind of makes sense that, the Gulf countries would be the ones to want to invest heavily in a technology like this that consumes a lot of power. But it begs the question of, what do we do about ESG, or how much power are we consuming? What does it do to the environment and climate change, all that stuff that people worry about? So those are some of the considerations I would think about when I think about ethics and AI mega projects.
For sure. And like you said earlier, there's definitely a lot of sticky and a lot that goes into a big project like this. So a lot that we're probably not knowing, probably behind the scenes as well. One last question though, how might the focus on region-specific AI models address unique challenges faced by the GCC countries?
Yeah, that's interesting. And are you asking from the perspective of, could there be biases in the AI models or the way AI is used, or you mean just in general, how could AI handle their needs differently?
I think more so in the article, they talked about how they are going to focus on region-specific large language models and AI solutions tailored to the Gulf Cooperation Council countries. And so kind of like, how is that developing? How can it affect those specific countries, if that makes sense?
Yeah, that's interesting. And I don't know, to be honest. I'm curious to know why that is, or what they have in mind. I wonder if it's something to do with, I mean, certainly language. You've got Arabic speaking countries versus English speaking. So I could see that, just the simple fact that the AI models presumably are incorporating Arabic into the models. But I also wonder if there's a cultural dimension too. Maybe there's some nuances of the Middle Eastern culture that the AI models can be trained on or learn about, and those nuances of doing business in the Middle East is a lot different than doing business in the U.S. culturally and just the way it works. So maybe there's nuances like that could be handled there. But I don't know. That's just pure speculation on my part.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's super interesting though to see this AI mega project announcement, and it definitely is probably something we'll follow throughout this podcast as well as it develops.
Yeah, super interesting. I will be curious to hear how that unfolds. I also be curious to hear how much that project ends up costing at the end of the day, because it sounds incredibly expensive. Yes. And how expensive is it going to be to run that too, just on a ongoing operating cost perspective? But we're a ways away from getting that information, but we'll keep an eye on it for sure. All right. Well, good. Well, thank you for those newsworthy topics, and thank you for pulling those audience questions from social media. We're going to shift gears. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to bring on Khalid Morris onto the show. He's a director of AI and data strategy at Third Stage Consulting. He's going to be on to talk about AI readiness and sort of that AI playbook to get started on your AI initiatives. And then later in the show, we will talk about why employees secretly hate change, regardless of what they might tell you, regardless of what you think on the surface or what you think you see. Chances are extremely high, close to 100%, that a majority of your employees do not like change, and they will not like the change that you're about to go through. So we're going to talk about why that is, and also, more importantly, what you can do about it to mitigate that risk and avoid the pitfall that goes along with that. We're going to talk about that later in the show as well. So we've got a lot more to cover. We'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control. My name is Eric Kimberling, and I'm the CEO and founder of Third Stage Consulting. Before we dive too far into today's content, I want to invite you to learn a little bit more about Third Stage Consulting, who we are and what we do. I've included a link to a video right here that describes Third Stage in a bit more detail. It talks about our story, our history, our philosophy, our clients, our service offerings, and that sort of thing. But in general, what Third Stage Consulting does is we're an independent and tech-agnostic consulting provider. We help clients through their entire digital transformation life cycles, beginning with digital strategy, software evaluation and selection, all the way through and including implementation planning, implementation readiness, and the actual implementation itself. We're technology agnostic, so we only represent our clients' best interests. We do not represent software vendors. But having said that, we work very closely with software vendors, all the leading players that you can imagine we've worked with, both in helping clients evaluate and select them, but also in helping clients implement those solutions as well. So we have a very broad, objective, agnostic view of the market that is meant to really represent your interest as you go through your digital transformation. I also encourage you to scan this QR code right here to get access to our resource center. This resource center has a ton of information, a ton of ebooks that are free. You have access to top 10 software rankings, playbooks for how to make your project more successful, guides to change management, YouTube videos, all kinds of stuff that are going to help you through your digital transformation. So I encourage you to scan this QR code to get access to those resources. And please feel free to reach out to me directly to brainstorm ideas about your project. Even if it's just informally, you want to bounce around some ideas and get some informal advice, I'd be happy to spend some time with you. So feel free to reach out to me. I've included my contact information below. You can also find it in the description field of this video as well.
The last thing you want to have happen is for your digital transformation to end up in court. I've been doing this for 20 years and I have seen everything. My name is Marcus Harris. I'm a software and technology attorney focusing my practice on drafting and negotiating software-related contracts and litigating software disputes across the country. Feel free to reach out to us at taftlaw.com. We'd love to talk to you about the litigation process and what you can expect.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 223. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm here with Darian and Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. This show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, which is an independent tech-agnostic consulting firm that helps clients throughout their digital transformations, including their AI initiatives, which is the next topic we're going to cover here today. which is AI readiness. How do we get ready for AI? What's the playbook to start putting together a roadmap for AI? All that stuff, because a lot of clients we're working with now on their AI initiatives are a bit overwhelmed, and they're just trying to figure out where to get started and how to get those first use cases in place, how to take baby steps before they walk and then eventually run, all that stuff. So we thought, why not bring on the expert in our company, the biggest expert in our company on this topic, and ask him a bunch of questions about how to get started. So all that being said, Khalid, thanks for joining the show today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
I'm excited for this conversation. You and I had a conversation a couple months ago talking about AI in general, AI trends and just sort of where the market is headed. But this is going to be a little more prescriptive, a little more focused on the front end of readiness and planning and that sort of thing. But before we jump into some of the questions I've got for you and get to some of the audience questions, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Well, I've been in consulting for some time, fresh out of graduate school here. So we're about 20 years into this, and obviously some years before in the finance and accounting world. All of it has pretty much been dedicated to business systems, ERP, BI, budgeting, forecasting, applications, kind of across the board. And I've kind of sat across multiple different sides of this from across the SDLC. And I've done a lot of data architecture, a lot of application integration work. I've done that prior to software as a service. I did that once software as a service sort of was introduced. And now we're excited about the market shifting once again now and really introducing AI concepts into the business system landscape. So it's always, to me, I tend to stay academic about these things, it's always fun for me to see how the market shifts, how businesses adjust, how the marketplace adjusts, and how businesses adjust their organizations to sort of deal with these advancements in information technology.
Yeah. And that's, I think, what makes AI such a cool technology and fun to learn about, but it can also be overwhelming. And it's almost like a moving target for organizations. They're trying to move forward with some sort of AI initiative. But just generally speaking, when you look at some of the clients we're working with, how do you define AI readiness, and what does that actually mean? How do you know if you're truly ready? What do you need to do to get ready? Like, how would you sort of frame at a high level what AI readiness is?
I would think about the traditional pillars, right? Technology, people, like really try to think about getting ready strategically first, like having some kind of vision that really aligns with your organization. We're very much true to that here at Third Stage, and we sort of always preach it across this kind of transformational digital transformation work. And we just think it's important, and AI is absolutely no exception. It's probably more important for AI even than some of the other exercises. But really starting there and then kind of moving to assessing organization across your data, across the people side. So really trying to understand how ready you are for the change itself, assessing it across the technology and your overall infrastructure, and whether or not what skills you have in-house, what tools you have, what platforms make the most sense for you. And so AI readiness is kind of that prep step to really align your organization, your technology, your people, and your processes in order to truly unravel the opportunities that AI has to present.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I want to pull up here in just a moment a slide that gives kind of a visual overview of an AI readiness framework that the audience can take away and learn from here in just a moment. But if you don't mind, Khalid, I don't want to get too academic and turn this into a typical consulting presentation like you and I both have a tendency to do. It's in our instincts, it's in our blood to show PowerPoint slides. But there is a couple good slides that we have on our presentation that we use to talk about AI readiness. So I want to pop this up here just for a second and maybe have you walk us through what these different components are. So as you're looking at this slide here, tell us a little bit about these 5 core dimensions of AI readiness and sort of how we could apply it to organizations.
Well, starting at the top there with strategy and really having a strategic alignment, it's just important to do this. Now, as it relates to AI, I think it's even more important, and I kind of mentioned that earlier, because so much of AI you don't know. I believe you really need to stay in process with AI. We've heard from clients multiple times over, we don't know what we don't know. And oftentimes you walk into an AI exercise or trying to run down the line of what does AI mean for our organization, and it's a whiteboard scenario. You are staring at a blank canvas and you're looking around at each other like, well, what do we do next? Well, so the strategy element really gives you a framework to really align the business goals with any potential outcomes that kind of come out of that. And the more targeted you are with understanding what your objectives are, the more I think you'll get out of really carving out AI solutions that make the most sense for your organization. So from a readiness end, always important to kind of start there. I think that is a first step really for any digital transformation project, to be honest, but certainly for AI, because you kind of have to have a come to Jesus moment with respect to how you're going to approach the overall exercise of definition for AI solutions. So starting there is basic, and then kind of moving more into a functional element. So when we're saying business process intelligence and opportunity discovery there, that's more of a functional discovery and operational assessment of sort that really allows you to carve out pain points. Now, I believe, and this is just AI's new, so we're all evolving here. The pain point part of the exercise here is more relevant for AI than even requirements. The requirements part, and the reason why I say this, typically for ERP solution, we're very requirement driven, and it makes all the sense. You kind of have broad functionality, et cetera, et cetera. Your pain points are more narrow, more acute, and AI has the ability to really dive into those targeted kind of pain points. You can really have a much more narrow conversation as it relates to the solutions that you're trying to develop, as well as the problems that you're trying to solve. So really, from a functional perspective, it's very important that you have your finger on the pain in your organization, and where you really would like to really find some high impact, big value gains from an AI solutioning kind of perspective. So it's a normal exercise in terms of functional discovery, but I think you go about it a little bit differently to really outline and target and have a tight list of your overall pain points. And then from there, data is a critical element for any digital transformation project. AI is pretty flexible around data, and you can, but it's important for you as an organization to really have an approach for how you're going to manage it. Is this going to be a centralized exercise where you're going to migrate things into kind of a centralized repository that sort of allows AI to kind of have a center that they can kind of pull and learn and grow and develop from? Or is your data all over the place? And it's going to be all over the place, and it's always going to be all over the place. Like, that's a strategy too. AI can be a solution for that kind of exercise too. But it's important for you as an organization to really understand where you are from a data perspective and from a quality perspective. In terms of, I believe in this kind of step, it's important to have owners and really put your finger on across your organization who owns what on the data side, We've said this in our previous conversations about this. Data is a strategic asset, and it's a very, very valuable strategic asset. And from a readiness perspective, it's important that you understand the value of your data, where your data is, who owns it, how it kind of gets adjusted, because it really becomes aftermath post when you actually develop AI solutions. It really becomes a quality exercise, so that you don't have any hidden biases that can dampen the quality of results that you get from an AI solution.
Right.
And then from there, that's when you kind of get into, well, what platform are we going to use, and how are we going to get our organization to really change and adopt this. And the platform part, I think, is it's important, but I think it's more normal. The change part, I want to emphasize, because change management has always been important. It was important prior to AI. It's important now. But with an AI component, so much confusion is in the marketplace. You can't neglect how change management applies there. And that continual reinforcement point is a part of your change management exercise. You need to have elements baked into your post-go live efforts that really include quality, because the biases that can happen in AI, it's very large. Your data can be off, and can be leading you down the wrong path, just because you didn't take that extra step to just do some basic checks around, does our AI solution have all of the up-to-date, proper, and accurate data, so that it's not kind of leading you in the wrong directions.
Yeah. So what's interesting about these core dimensions here is it almost seems like you could plug in any sort of technology into this, as far as things you need to do to get ready. I mean, there's certain things that are more important to AI, like data is, AI or data is important no matter what, but especially with AI. But beyond that, it looks very similar to what you might say for ERP or CRM or any other sort of enterprise tech. These are some of the major dimensions you want to focus on. You want to make sure you've got alignment and business process intelligence and data readiness. That's all stuff that's relevant to any sort of enterprise tech enablement. But what are your thoughts on that? Is that true, or are there new?
Yeah, AI is programming at this point. It's the biggest difference is, for me, it's APIs, right? The technology is already there for you. You're tapping into that from an API perspective. So you're kind of plugging your world into kind of this advanced element where you have sort of these logic routines and algorithms that allow for this, for this intelligence factor, for lack of a better word, to sort of tap into your data structure. So there's a very programmatic element to this. There's an integration kind of element to this, and all of that's normal. All of this is work that we've done for years. I've done API work for years, prior to when this sort of became live for business systems. Now it just opens up more information. That's really what an API does. It kind of is a channel or portal, kind of opens up a bunch of functionality, and that's really what's happening here. So the normal course of business for from a digital transformation are all in play, but it changes a little bit, right? Like, this makes your business systems way more flexible. AI doesn't really care what your current state is. You can have a outdated, old legacy system kind of as your infrastructure. You can have a modern infrastructure. AI kind of has something to say about both. You can have data silos. You can have a centralized location. AI can kind of fit with kind of both. So because it's so fluid, I think it's just more important for you as an organization to kind of just take the time to say, like, how does this thing look for us over the next couple of years? And then how do we want our AI to look with respect to addressing pain points, reaching business objectives, reaching overall business goals, and then kind of just kind of going from there. It should feel like a regular digital transformation. It just doesn't take as long, right? Like, ERP is a could be a multi-year process and that sort of thing. I would liken this more to business intelligence. And how when we used to implement a lot of business intelligence systems, it was really scaled down. You're looking at 4 or 6 month process. You got some change management after that, but really cutting into that 4 to 9 month kind of window versus ERP, where you're looking at a year and a half, potentially 2. If it's a large organization, it might be multi-year. So,
yeah. Now, what about you talk about in this presentation that you've put together for our clients, and you've actually written a book on this stuff too. You have a book out on Amazon, which I should have mentioned that up front. That tell us a little bit about the book before I forget.
Future-proofing your business. It really gets into a lot of these layers. It gets into AI readiness. It really gets into data and data silos and how to sort of manage it as a strategic exercise, and really kind of getting the preparatory components of like, how do I prepare my organization for this AI revolution so that you really can maximize the overall benefit there.
Yeah. So check that out on Amazon. You can find, if you look up Khalid Morris, Future Proof, you'll find his book there.
It's called Future Proofing Your Business with AI.
Yeah, Future Proofing Your Business with AI. So, but getting back to the question I was going to ask you on this though, but one of the things you talk about in some of the thought leadership that you've published and that we use with our clients is that you should, prioritize AI use cases. To find some examples or some use cases of how you might actually use AI in your organization. And there's, organizations we work with, there's just countless, almost like endless ways you could be using AI. And obviously you're not going to boil the ocean. You're not just going to, overnight implement a bunch of AI agents and suddenly, you eliminate a bunch of headcount and tomorrow you're super efficient and you have no humans doing any of the work anymore. It's all AI. Right. That's obviously not going to happen, but they're not going to happen in the short term. But what do you do to prioritize, or how do you recommend organizations prioritize and find those use cases that are of the highest value?
Well, I think you kind of shed some light, because this is a huge space. I mean, I don't know that we can put our arms around some of the limits here. We're still understanding how it impacts organizations and some of these use cases and value, et cetera, et cetera. Here, we try to narrow this down into a few basic categories. So our categories are insight generation, process optimization, risk management, experience, and strategic kind of enablement. Those are some basic parameters just to try to narrow down. We can go further. I mean, we can go down the line. Those are just some basic ones that we try to narrow our use cases into, to try to have a more targeted conversation about what use cases make sense across kind of those parameters. But use cases to me is the goal, like trying to kind of get to a space where you can ultimately convert those pain points, the issues that you're having, into use cases that have value for your organization. That to me is the exercise of really coming up with an AI solution that makes sense for your organization. And it'll be different for different organizations, just like different organizations have different pain points. But as I mentioned earlier, AI is targeted. It's not this broad functionality that, you buy some software and it just hits all these different lanes and it's telling you we have these features, whether you need them or whether you don't need them. AI, it should be very narrow to, we're doing this because we have this, it's solving a problem within your organization and maybe even the marketplace, maybe a behavior. And you're reaping the benefits of that. It's the business case for AI is significantly different. And that to me is where the use cases here become important, because you're creating use cases that drive value for your organization. And the frustrating part about this, I think, for organizations, when you try to have this conversation with them, is they don't know what their use cases are. So they're like, so what use cases are those? I'm like, well, you tell me, and it becomes a what comes first conversation. But when you go through the process of it, then you start to see what a classic example is in insights. If you think about it from an insight a generation perspective, something as simple as forecasting. Forecasting I've done forecasting applications. I know that there are organizations that spend a significant amount of time forecasting in the university world. Education, it's a strategic plan for education. It takes months for them to budget and plan. It's like an annualized fight of how much money is my department going to get, how much. There's countless conversations, debate around it. It takes months for them to come to an agreement around what their strategic plan looks like, what forecast kind of budgeting and kind of forecasting components. What does it look like for the school, particularly large ones? AI can do that daily. I mean, AI can create forecast on a daily basis with or without you. Right. And so I'm not suggesting that you allow it to kind of do it without you. I'm saying that it significantly cuts the time down. So that exercise that you put in forecasting, whether it's as complex as what a university would do, or maybe it's a quarterly exercise. There's plenty of organizations that kind of have a more detailed quarterly exercise around forecasting. Like, you can do that in 50% of the time, 75% of the time, and still have the same kind of desired results because you're utilizing things like AI, right? Some organizations may not use that at all. Some organizations, that might be everything for them, right? So those use cases of where AI kind of becomes significant varies. From organization to organization, and that organization has to do the work either with consulting or just kind of sitting down by themselves. They have to kind of do the work to ultimately get to a set of use cases that make AI of value for that organization. And the fun part for me, and this is kind of touches what we talked about last time, is you're not just buying a system here, you're creating IP that you own for your organization. So I encourage all organizations to think about how we own our own AP. Like, what does our AI look like, and how much of that do we own in terms of our own intellectual property?
Yeah, and that's a great point. And one thing that makes AI different that I think is exciting, but can also create challenges or additional challenges for organizations, is the fact that unlike ERP and CRM, HCM, some of these commercial off-the-shelf systems that are very mature, they've been around for a long time, those systems, when you deploy them, you're not really creating a distinct competitive advantage. You're sort of, you're automating, yes, you're becoming more efficient, but you're not really changing your business model. You're not totally rethinking, a new way of doing business, because you're going to end up doing things the way anyone else who uses that same product is going to do things. But AI is different because there's some creativity there. There's some, additional opportunities or ways you could use established technology like AI, but use it in a very distinctly competitive or different sort of way, which I think that's exciting. But back to your first point on your readiness framework, you have to have that strategic alignment and a vision.
Absolutely.
What do you want? Like, because you could automate everything in your business, but some of it's not really going to add that much value. Some of it's going to add a tremendous amount of value. Some of it's going to allow you to change your business model or change your customer experience or make you better at planning, like you said. So there's a lot of things you could do, but you just need to have your priorities set straight so you can focus.
I would think about it like a pie. If you can cut, let's say we cut our pie into 4 different parts.
What kind of pie are we talking here? Just to clarify.
Sweet potato pie. I like sweet potato pie. This isn't Thanksgiving, but let's just say we have a nice sweet potato pie that's cut into 4 parts. A traditional CRM or ERP system, like you said, they're just going to give you the whole pie, and you're like, I'm not that hungry. I only really want that one piece. That's the part for my organization that's really, really important. Those other 3 pieces aren't. It's just not that important for what we're doing, what our setup is. Maybe we have another system that we're doing this in, and we just don't need your system to do those other parts. They're still charging you for that. It's still a part of their offering. it's a part of their implementation, which may make it longer or whatever the case kind of may be. But you're going to get four parts of this pie, whether you like it or not, right?
Right.
AI, you're getting the whole pie. Like you're getting one target. That's why the pain point conversation is important here, because it's very targeted to AI solution should address a specific problem, if not a few problems in your organization. And when it addresses that problem, it's almost like custom programming, right? Even though it's more API driven, so it's more unlocking than it is more programming, but it's like a custom solution to a problem within your organization. And that's why, to your point, from a business value perspective, it's sort of sky's the limits, because it's like we're dealing with the parts of this story that we need, and it's cost effective. It's not as expensive because I'm not buying a bunch of stuff that I don't need.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you continue with that pie analogy. I mean, you're going to get sick if you eat the whole pie, or at least I would. If I eat a whole sweet potato pie,
we know that's happening in the marketplace, right? You just got a lot of organizations that are just sick of ERP companies, and
especially the ones that are trying to do other stuff in addition to AI. They're doing ERP and they're doing all sorts of other stuff. I'm here with Khalid Morris. We're talking about how to get ready for your AI initiative and how to build that playbook for your organization. We've got a lot more to cover. We'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control.
Just tell me what you've got to say. Tell me, I've been waiting for so long to hear the truth.
If you are involved in any sort of digital transformation or business change initiative, you'll want to download the Digital Transformation Report. With its comprehensive overview of business and technology trends and best practices, this report is a must-have guide for any transformation project or executive team. Download this free report by visiting Third Stage Consulting at thirdstage-consulting.com. You can also visit our website to learn more about us or download independent reports, videos, and other best practices. Again, visit thirdstage-consulting.com today to learn how you can take your transformation to the third stage of success.
I want to invite you to join me and other thought leaders in the digital transformation space to Stratosphere 2025. It's an annual conference we've hosted now for 7 years in a row. It's a great event. It's live in Denver, Colorado, but we're also offering it virtually via hybrid tickets. And we're going to have a lot of different speakers here, including myself as a keynote, as well as others that you may know from the industry. And this is a perfect conference if you're interested in any sort of digital transformation, including ERP and CRM and HCM. And actually, the theme for this year's session is AI and how AI is affecting all different types of digital transformation. But in addition to AI, we'll also talk about the fundamentals of digital transformation, including program management, evaluating the right software, digital strategy, change management, process improvement, all the things you need to know to make your project successful. It's also a great way to network and learn from others. So just being part of a community that is also like-minded and going through the same things you are, that's another value. And you can join, like I said, remotely in person, and you can also buy VIP tickets if you'd like more exclusive access to me and others from the Third Stage team and other speakers that are going to be there. So I hope to see you soon. Check out my discount code below for discounted tickets. You can go to stratosphere2025.com for more information, including the full agenda, and I hope to see you there.
Are you looking for ways to promote your product or service to enterprise technology decision makers and influencers throughout the world, like the ones who listen to this podcast? Major Tom Productions creates media, events, and influencer marketing for B2B technology providers. Our productions are exciting, educational, disruptive, and effective. Most importantly, they create results. Our content is unlike any other in this industry, engaging, influential, and trusted by technology buyers and influencers throughout the world. Each month, our productions reach hundreds of thousands of targeted buyers and decision makers who trust and engage with our honest and tech-agnostic content. With long-tail viral results and engagement with our content, Major Tom Productions provides a way to reach your target market and create awareness, calls to action, and a connection with potential customers. So collaborate with us today. Learn how we can feature your product or service on podcasts such as Transformation Ground Control, Journey to S4HANA, and Journey to Dynamics 365. We can also feature your brand on our YouTube channel called Digital Transformation with Eric Kimberling, which boasts over 100,000 subscribers and over 2 million video views per year. You can also participate in our in-person events, including our Digital Stratosphere Conference. Contact us today to learn more. We can tailor a marketing campaign that works for you. We look forward to helping more people learn more about and become engaged with your brand.
Welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 223. My name is Eric Kimberling. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. This show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, which is an independent and tech-agnostic consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys. And the show is sponsored by produced by Major Tom Productions. So thank you for being here today. I'm here with Khalid Morris. We're talking about AI readiness and how to get started with a playbook related to your AI initiatives. Building on what you were saying here, and I don't see who put this comment in. All I can see is it's from LinkedIn. So thank you, whoever put this question in. But the question here is, how do you assess if an ERP system is ready for AI augmentation? What signals or metrics should we look for?
That's an interesting question. When you say, is an ERP system ready for AI? All systems are ready for AI. In fact, AI is system agnostic. It doesn't matter whether or not you have a legacy system, a modern ERP system. It's just kind of looking back at you as a mirror. And the reason why this is the case is the connective thread for AI, the backbone of your organization, really, and certainly the backbone of any system is your data. Mm-hmm. That's what feeds the AI. So before you kind of get into is an ERP system ready for AI, I think the more relevant question is more on the data side. And is your data ready for AI? Does your organization, in terms of how it manages and understands its data, is that part are ready for AI? So I think this is a data conversation we're having and not really a systems conversation. ERP system does have functions and features on the AI side. Those functions and features may or may not be great use cases for what you're going through. But AI, you can develop your own, and it can certainly use the data that's in an ERP system. It can use the data that's outside of your ERP system. It can use external data. You can feed AI data from the internet, seasonal data, weather information. When you kind of get into logistics and that sort of thing, right? It can kind of give you predictive scheduling around where your shortages are going to be just based on seasonality. I mean, it's that level of complex, but it's all based on data. Right. And so, and more than it's based on what system does that information live in. And the reason why that's the case is because in all ERP systems, modern have really just dealt with this from a software as a service perspective. They're all integration oriented. It's because AI is really an API. It is just how you integrate with AI sources to sort of unlock a lot of those features and functions.
That's an interesting way to look at it. I guess I've never thought of AI as an API, but it sort of is. It sort of fills that role, of what middleware or BI and analytics.
That's exactly what's happening, at least from the way I have simplified it in order for my small brain to start to get some sense around what is going on here. How does open API? That's right now. You can go developer license right now and build Chat GPT type of functions within your website. Within your small kind of development. How do you do that? You just go tap in to get a developer license. They'll charge you a small fee there. It won't be that much up front. And once you have that API tapped into your application, it then unlocks all of those features that AI has, and now your website has it or your application has it. So that's the way I think about it, and it kind of, once I think about it that way, then it sort of opens up, I think, a lot of why I think your use cases are wide open. All you have to do is figure them out, and then you're kind of open to a lot of features and functions to sort of deal with that are outside of your current capabilities.
Yeah, and you talked last time you were on this podcast when you and I talked about AI. You made a comment around ERP and AI, and I, just to back up for a minute, I mean, this sort of relates back to the original question of how do you assess if an ERP system is ready for AI? First of all, all the ERP vendors, all the major ERP vendors are investing heavily in R&D for AI. I mean, they're all doubling down on AI, just like they double down on cloud and SaaS solutions. So they're in on this whole AI thing. But you have some strong opinions on, do you need to rely on your ERP vendor to provide AI capabilities, or is it better to go off on your own and find sort of a standalone AI tool set that you can then integrate or lay on top of your ERP system? Or how do you view that, or how do you navigate that decision?
I think it goes back what we're talking about in our conversation. We're back in a use case conversation, and think about the time to implement here. If you already have an ERP system in place, and that ERP system has AI functions that are helpful, just think about those use cases. If those use cases are applicable to what you're going through, why go through the exercise of this extended implementation or building out kind of an AI solution for features that you already have at your fingertips? You don't necessarily need it. So, but then there are going to be some features and functions that may live outside of your ERP system, and a lot of that might be because of your model. Maybe your ERP system doesn't touch all of your data. Maybe it's just a level of complexity that they haven't been able to get to. Maybe there's a uniqueness or an advantage that you're trying to build in as a use case that the ERP system doesn't have scope for. So all of those things, I think, really start to tell the tale for, does it make sense for me to use AI through my ERP system, or does it make sense for us to look at other routes? But either way, you got to do the work. I think it comes back to the strategy element and really understanding where your organization is going and what does it need its AI to kind of look like to be competitive in the marketplace.
Yeah. And the other piece of that too, that's sort of an intangible consideration, is how much more do you want to add to the whole vendor lock risk? Vendor lock being, if you're using SAP, Oracle, Microsoft, one of these big enterprise-wide systems, you're sort of stuck with that system, for lack of a better word, for better, for worse. No matter how that system evolves or how your business evolves, it's hard to switch, especially in a cloud environment. It's a lot harder to switch ERP systems now in this post-cloud and SaaS world that we're in.
Yeah.
But with AI, if you also rely on your ERP vendor to provide AI capabilities, now you're just adding to that risk of lock, and now the vendor has a lot of control over you and a lot of leverage over raising subscription costs, and that's a whole other thing. AI agents can actually drive up your ERP costs very significantly. If you deploy 100 AI agents or hundreds of them, that's adding to your user count and your subscription cost. So that's all stuff you have to consider.
I think we're honestly moving into a world where, I mean, we can have this conversation now, and I can talk tactically about, does it matter now, or which one makes the most sense? But fast forward to 5 years, what does 5 years look like kind of from now? I think we're moving into a world where, as an organization, you do need to understand the AI that you have, just like you understand the data that you have.
Right.
You have X SaaS sort of data spaces. Maybe you have Azure, AWS, and you kind of hold some data in a cloud repository somewhere. I think we're going to get into a space where you kind of have to answer those kinds of questions for your own AI, and it gets into IP and what do you own for your AI model. Doesn't mean you won't use ERP AI features or others, but I think it'll still come back to, what is your organization doing on the
Yeah.
AI front, because all of your competitors will most likely be doing different things on the AI front. So that mix, I don't know what that mix is. We don't know what that is. Even as internally in our own organization, we're dealing with the same dynamics that everyone else is dealing with. But those are questions that I think organizations are going to just have to answer for themselves to kind of really continue to be viable, not just this year, but 5 years from now, 10 years from now.
Yeah. Yeah. I've got a follow-up question from the audience about small and mid-sized companies that I'm going to get to in just a moment. But first, I want to invite the audience, if you're interested in this AI topic, which I assume you are if you're watching this stream or this interview, I want to invite you to download our Guide to AI. It's a free guide on our website. If you scan this QR code, you can download that guide. It'll give you some practical guidance and strategies and frameworks to determine how AI can fit into your organization and how to get started on your AI journey. So be sure to scan that code for a deeper dive into this topic here. And I'll leave that up here for a moment while I get to this next question here. This is from Nasheed on LinkedIn. Nasheed says, how can AI help in small and medium segments for ERP? So the small and mid-market companies, is AI a big company thing, or AI being used at small and mid-sized companies?
I actually did not have this thought a few months ago. I am starting to come to this thought now. I actually think AI is easier for small than it is for large organizations. I mean, it feels like a heavier, like when you think about a large organization, think about a utility company. I've done some utility work kind of in my past. Huge data sets, just thousands of customers. It could be 100,000 customers if they're servicing a given region or plus, and they all have these huge kind of data sets and data models that they're sort of dealing with. Consuming that level of information and kind of putting AI solutions on top of that. That's a big lift, especially for an organization that can be bureaucratic, and kind of hard to kind of get the sign-offs the way that you kind of want. Small businesses don't have that issue. The AI is very targeted. So again, the small business can kind of look at, I just need this. If I can get this, then I become competitive in the marketplace. This one pain point that they need to solve, and the cost of doing that is way smaller than you think. Right. So for me, small businesses should certainly be looking at AI to be competitive. And I mean that from everything from resourcing. You have a lot of bots now that starts to sort of do things. You don't need a robot. You don't have to build a robot in order to have some functionality. You might just need to build a workflow to sort of really manage some of your sales traffic. Just having some basic kind of workflow management there, and something that simple can kind of elevate your small business. Right. And something that simple is as simple as some smaller subscription to something like Zapier or something like that. Right. So it's for me, this exercise, I think small business sometimes gets intimidated by it, but they should lean into it. It's the same principles, really trying to understand strategically what we're trying to accomplish and really developing out those use cases that make sense for your organization. So it's not like you have to do anything differently. But the outcomes, I think, are not, people should not think about AI outcomes as this overly costly endeavor. It can be expensive. It does not have to be expensive. It just depends on your use cases and your organization and kind of what makes the most sense. I guarantee you it won't be as expensive as an ERP system, though.
Yeah, that's a great point. Some more audience comments and questions here. Sergio on LinkedIn says, thank you for the insights. Thanks for being here today, Sergio. Appreciate that. And Anwar on LinkedIn says, we need a clear conclusive for AI. Greetings from Saudi Arabia. So I think what Sergio or what Anwar is saying there is you need to have a clear, conclusive business case, business value, purpose, all that stuff you've been talking about. Here's a great question from Darian, our podcast co-host here. I'm actually, I don't think I've asked you this before, so this would be interesting to get your knee-jerk reaction to this, Khalid. But Darian says, how do you strike the balance between using AI as a layer, as you were talking about, sort of like an API or integration tool, or reporting tool, analytical tool, all that stuff, How do you strike the balance between using AI as a layer versus using it as a crutch that delays needed upgrades to your core enterprise technology?
We're actually dealing with some of that. We have a couple clients that are dealing with that same question, and it's a luxury. But I would think about it as in software development, there's this principle. It's called separation of concerns. At least historically, that has sort of been the way, certainly the way I learned it, where you want to separate things out in your architecture so that you can replace it, right? So like the data layer, you want to have that separated from your logic layer, because if I change the data, I don't want to have to rebuild the whole application. I just want to take out that one database, put in the new database, and then boom, we're still swimming here, and we don't have to, recode the entire application. I view AI as an additional layer. I do. I think that we're looking at a situation where it's kind of another dimension there to that architectural structure. In terms of concerns, where you have to kind of have an AI layer that you can kind of take in and take out. So with that, each of those layers, I think you have that question, like, how are you managing, like, what does this layer look like? Does this layer need to be upgraded? Does the next, like you kind of have that same question, I think, in good governance. You kind of have that question across each layer, and you have to answer it across each. But you can have an older legacy architecture that's in place that from a current state, yes, it's a risk. Yes, you need to change it. Yes, you have zero plans of doing that right now.
Right.
For whatever reason, might organizationally can't get aligned. It's a problem. You don't have the budget for switching out, your DOS system. It's fine. AI can still get put as a layer right on top of that. So we're living in that kind of world where you can have advancement on top of kind of outdated models underneath it. And it's different. It's not really best practice, right? You still have risk in your model that you need to deal with. But yes, you can handle the conversations and reasons around each of those layers with a segmented AI layer. So I personally see this as a segmented layer, which kind of allows you to kind of have separate conversations across. But there are obviously instances where it's integrated. I mean, ERP systems, those features and functions are integrated. So it just depends on the organization and how they function. I'm just an advocate for those layers.
Yeah. Very interesting. Another comment here on LinkedIn. Rakith says, is this a recorded one? It's being recorded, but it's actually happening live right now. So thanks for clarifying that and making us prove to you that this is a live session. Here's an interesting question from Jason on YouTube. Jason says, is digital transformation going to be total AI transformation in the near future? So do you think digital AI and digital transformation are kind of not the new norm, but is AI going to be what drives digital transformation in the future?
I think that's going to be the case for digital transformations. I think in the near term, I think every organization should be having a digital transformation conversation around AI. That's my take. I think, Eric, you're probably in the same space, just given what you're kind of seeing. Everyone's dealing with this digital transformation and AI they're the same. We're still talking about your digital transformation journey. It's just that prior to AI, those conversations were more built around certain systems, right? It might be a CRM system, it might be ERP system, might be a business intelligence system. It was more of a business system kind of conversation. And I think we're having a more targeted conversation about you may or to the question before, you may or may not still have those questions that you need to answer in your business systems, but a separate conversation is happening as it relates to AI, and that is what does our AI platform look like for this organization going forward, and how does that impact our business strategy? And that conversation is such a critical conversation because it really has to do with your viability in the marketplace. right? Like those business system conversations, you're dealing with what you're dealing with. You want to be more efficient, but it's not a survival issue all the time. Sometimes it is, but it's more just about efficiency and profitability and subscriptions and, finances, and just a bunch of operational conversations. AI is more of a survival, like what are our competitors doing? Can we do competitive analysis around what our competitors are doing to kind of put us into a negative position here in 5 years because we don't have a capability that they now have, that it's going to take us a while to figure out? Like everyone should be having that AI transformation conversation from a strategy perspective so that they understand what their organization looks like tomorrow.
Yeah. Sergio on LinkedIn says, thank you for the insights. Thank you for that feedback. Here's another question. This is from Daniel on YouTube. Daniel says, thank you for this live session. What are your thoughts on AI and data privacy? Biz leaders are worried that confidential data and documents could be uploaded outside the organizations. So talk to us about cybersecurity, data
Business
privacy.
leaders? How about Europe? How about governments? How about, I mean, our country and US isn't really dealing with it, but Europe certainly is. And certain states are kind of really trying to deal with what the security model looks like for artificial intelligence. And I think this is an evolving thing. I think that we'll find these things out as we go. When you're new into the marketplace, just think about when the internet became, new, and when that hit around the mid 90s, everyone was scrambling and trying to figure things out. Technically, you could have, if you owned www.coke.com, Coke was trying to figure out, well, I should be able to sue you, right? Because how can you own Coke's URL? Because I bought it on the domain registry. So it's like, well, what was that classified as? They didn't know at that time. Now we have those things fleshed out pretty well, and we understand what is. And it's the same to me with AI. We're fleshing out things in real time. So everyone is struggling with what privacy looks like in this particular world. And I don't blame them. I think we learn as we go. I think that you create privacy and security kind of mandates in your organization. I think your data governance model needs to be tight. We're advocates for owning your own IP for that reason. When you pass everything over to a software as a service, I think there's some basic questions in terms of, my data versus another organization's data and what we sign off to in our agreements with respect to data, who owns it, because you should always own your data. Like I said, it's the strategic asset. I mean, we have I've said this before, but Facebook is a multi-billion-dollar organization specifically because it owns a lot of data, and so I understand the data privacy question. The more concerned that you are about that, I think it pushes you more into a world where you control your AI, and you control you put guardrails around your data and your AI so that you have protections in place. But in real time, we're all trying to figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, we are indeed. And the comment here from Jason, appreciate the insights. Khalid was having the same thought. So you answered one of his questions earlier, and he's thanking you for that. Before I ask you this kind of closing question, Khalid, I want to share with the audience again our guide to AI. If you're interested in AI, you want to read more about it, do some research, just get a deeper understanding. Go ahead and download the guide to AI. You can scan the QR code on the screen in front of you, or if you don't have the ability to scan it right now, or if you're listening to the audio only version of this podcast, we'll include a link in the show notes or the description field below. So be sure to check that out. But I'll leave that QR code up for the rest of the episode for you to scan in the meantime. But just to sort of bring this all full circle, to give us some practical next steps and guidance. Let's say I'm a business leader. I'm interested in AI. Don't know where to get started. I mean, what are 2 or 3 tips or steps I could take to get going now?
Well, if depending on what kind of business or what kind of organization you have. We're always open and willing from a consultancy perspective to kind of help. And I do think that you will have to build partners into your exercise, especially if it's a large organization at some level, right? So I think it's a real having that internal view of what kind of conversations we need to kind of have. Obviously, here at Third Stage, we can help with some of those conversations. So that's an option, is picking up the phone and kind of calling someone like us to kind of potentially help. If you want some internal steps, it starts with really having that internal conversation at the executive level to kind of talk strategy, to kind of say, what do we have a plan in place? And it could be frank, it could be honest, because to be honest, most of the answers to this is no, we don't. And I think that's normal for where we are in the world. And as you're starting to kind of have that conversation of no, we don't, you start to try to put in place, like, what do we need our AI to kind of look like to meet our business objectives? I think it's 2 tracks. It's certainly the frame that we're carving out with respect to really getting to some tight use cases that and can have some value and kind of can be applied to some of your pain points or business issues. And I think it's also a competitive situation where you can kind of do some analysis in the marketplace, do some basic research in terms of what is happening in my industry, what are my competitors doing from an AI perspective? How's that going to, just from a forecast perspective, going to change the marketplace, and are we necessarily ready for that? I think that's a 2-track conversation that you can have as a business leader to start to kind of get in front of what this looks like for you. And I would do that kind of in a hurry. I mean, not in a we're going to be out of business tomorrow perspective, but having a healthy level of impatience around how this impacts your organization here over the next few years. And I say that because just think about the last few months and what kind of gains and change has happened. I think about this year and last year, where we were sitting here in May and what I was thinking about last May as it relates to this very topic. And it's like, just drastically different. So I think this is moving at a very fast rate. And as a result of that, I think you want to get in front of it more so in a hurry versus not. And you may not have all the details down of what you're going to do, but just having a plan in place, just understanding kind of where your organization is going with it can go a long way. In comparison to not,
aimlessly deploying technology,
cool. And then turning around and then saying, when did that happen? Like why is this happening to me?
Yeah. How is that ever a good idea? It's because we didn't.
It's not. Ignorance is not blitz.
Right. Exactly. All right. Thank you again, Khalid. Great conversation. And thank you to the audience for the really good questions and comments. That conversation went a lot of different directions I wasn't expecting, which is what makes the audience engagement so fun. Got a lot we want to cover based on that conversation. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll debrief on some of what we just talked about with Khalid. And then we're also going to talk about why employees hate change. Whether you know it or not, whether you like it or not, they do hate change. So what can you do about it? We're going to talk about all that here when we come back from a quick break. We'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control.
I'll give you anything to feel it coming. Do you wake up on your own?
I'm excited to announce the release of our 2025 Digital Transformation Report. It's available now on the Third Stage Consulting website, www.thirdstage-consulting.com. This report gives you an unbiased, technology-agnostic insight to help you optimize your organization's projects for success. Get your copy today using the QR code in front of me or on our website.
Are you looking for ways to promote your product or service to enterprise technology decision makers and influencers throughout the world, like the ones who listen to this podcast? Major Tom Productions creates media, events, and influencer marketing for B2B technology providers. Our productions are exciting, educational, disruptive, and effective. Most importantly, they create results. Our content is unlike any other in this industry, engaging, influential, and trusted by technology buyers and influencers throughout the world. Each month, our productions reach hundreds of thousands of targeted buyers and decision makers who trust and engage with our honest and tech-agnostic content. With long-tail viral results and engagement with our content, Major Tom Productions provides a way to reach your target market and create awareness, calls to action, and a connection with potential customers. So, collaborate with us today. Learn how we can feature your product or service on podcasts such as Transformation Ground Control, Journey to S/4HANA, and Journey to Dynamics 365. We can also feature your brand on our YouTube channel called Digital Transformation with Eric Kimberling, which boasts over 100,000 subscribers and over 2 million video views per year. You can also participate in our in-person events, including our Digital Stratosphere Conference. Contact us today to learn more. We can tailor a marketing campaign that works for you. We look forward to helping more people learn more about and become engaged with your brand.
And I'll do anything you ever dreamed to be complete. Little pieces of nothing that fall.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, the podcast that covers everything related to digital transformation, a tech-agnostic view of strategy, people, process, and technology. Thank you for being here today. The show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting. And Darian, we just had Khalid on the show to talk about AI readiness. What were some of your thoughts and takeaways from the conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I found it incredibly relevant to probably what challenges leaders are going through right now with everything happening with AI so quickly. So I just wanted to ask, a few follow-up questions for you, Eric, to kind of continue this conversation. First of all, one point that I thought Khalid made so clear, and I thought this analogy was really good, was that the AI is system agnostic and more of a reflection of your data quality than your tech stack. I think he said it's like a mirror, and I think that's such a good way to say it and something I hadn't heard before. But one question for this is, when organizations ask if their ERP is ready for AI, should the question always pivot to, is your data ready? What does data readiness look like in a practical sense then for companies?
Yeah, I think that is the way to frame it. And that's been a common challenge and misperception with organizations, is that, their ERP system, for example, is perceived to be broken when in fact it's their data that oftentimes is broken, or it's the data that's corrupt within the system. And that's not necessarily the system's fault. It's usually human error and human fault that causes that human or that data corruption. So yeah, I think regardless of what you're using, whether you're using a modern ERP system, an old ERP system, I don't want to say it doesn't matter, but to Khalid's point, if you're viewing AI as a sort of an integration layer that sits on top of your legacy systems, then you could still leverage modern AI technologies with less than modern back office ERP and enterprise technologies. That's a big part of why companies like Palantir and Snowflake and Rapid, those are three examples of AI-driven low-code, no-code types of systems that can sit on top of legacy systems. That's why those providers, those software vendors have done so well, is because they recognize the need for modern technology, but they also recognize the need or the risk aversion that a lot of companies have to wanting to rip out their old, all their back office systems and replacing it with something new. That's highly risky. It's expensive. Very rarely do these big, massive back office ERP implementations, very rarely does it lead to tangible, measurable business value. So in some cases, you need to ask yourself, well, why do that? If I can put a new technology on top of it that's a lot less costly and risky, and it's going to take a lot less time, and I can get immediate value, why wouldn't I do that? Now, it doesn't fix the problem that you've got these old, outdated systems that you're still sitting on, and at some point you are going to have to replace them. But if you've only had the system for 5 or 10 years and it's not the most modern cloud solution, That's not the end of the world. You might be able to get another 5 or 10 or 20 years out of it. And that's okay. I know it's cool to say that you need to be on the newest technology, but it's not so cool to say you need to be on the newest technology, regardless of the cost and risk to your organization. So that's the way I look at it. And that's what we do as a company at Third Stage is we're independent, tech agnostic. We don't care if you go through a big, massive tech initiative or not. What we care about is helping companies through the general transformation. It may or may not include big, sexy, fancy technologies, but it's definitely going to include process improvements, organizational improvements, strategic improvements, data improvements, things like that.
For sure. And one more follow-up question on your guys' conversation. Khalid said something kind of like AI is easier for small businesses because it's targeted, cheaper, and less bureaucratic. What would your ideal AI starter kit, I guess, look like for a small business with limited resources but a very high ambition?
I mean, I would probably start with AI agents, just whether, and especially if you're already using if you're using Salesforce, for example, if you're using Salesforce CRM and you're trying to expand its footprint a little bit, or if you're happy with Salesforce, you might start to think about, well, how could I leverage AI agents, from Salesforce in that example. And the reason I say that is because it is a low cost, low risk way to deploy AI technology, but it's also a way to allow you to scale your company and grow without necessarily needing to hire a bunch of bodies and adding to your fixed overhead. So that's what I would probably do, is start with Agentic AI before you get into the super fancy, more analytical and generative AI type use cases. You might start with Agentic AI just because it's becoming so common and there's so many options available to you on different technology technology marketplaces and bolt-ons to existing technologies.
Is there any specific agentic AI tools that you are currently really loving?
Yeah, I mean, for these customer service, customer facing intensive organizations, I think there's a lot of value there. So if you're a telco, a utility, a high volume provider of any product or service, where you're dealing with a high volume of customers, if you can use Agentic AI to help provide more smarter interactions and more common touch points and interactions with your customers, that could be a great way to build a differentiator and a stickiness with your business. So that's one that I like, that I really do like, is the customer service side of things. I think there's a lot you can do there to get big gains.
For sure. Yeah, super interesting conversation. I feel like Khalid, whenever he's talking about AI, I always learn so much from him.
Yeah, he's written a book on it. He's helped us with a lot of our thought leadership. In fact, a lot of the thought leadership I put out there, I sort of base it on his thinking and what I've borrowed or stolen from him, depending on how you look at it. So yeah, he's definitely a brainchild behind a lot of what we're doing on the AI front.
Yeah, for sure. Super great conversation though, but I'm excited to get into this next kind of segment, our first non-AI kind of topic of the day.
I know, finally, we get away from technology. Now we can talk about people, the people side of transformation. Yeah, we're going to play you this video clip where it's from my YouTube channel. It's where I talk about this common myth that executives especially have. I think the higher up you are in an organization, the more likely you are to fall into this trap. And that trap is the belief that your people are excited about change now and will continue to be excited about change, and they will continue to support the change longer term. What typically happens with clients we work with is, on the surface, yes, they're excited. Yes, they understand the vision for why we need to change. They don't like the old systems. They look forward to new technologies that's easier to use, all that stuff. So on the surface, yes, they're excited. But once you start peeling back the layers of the onion of what that change is going to entail and how it's going to affect people's jobs and how it's going to automate certain things, it's going to disrupt people's jobs. It could be for the better long term, but in the short term, it's going to be disruptive. It's going to be painful. It's going to be difficult. That's where people start to turn, and they don't turn in a way that's going to be obvious sabotaging of a project. That's actually the least of your worries. In fact, you'd almost be better off if they were trying to sabotage the project, because you could see it a lot easier. The harder part is the stuff under the surface. It's more subtle. It's the fear-based stuff. It's not because they're ill-willed or they have bad intentions. It's because they're afraid and they're confused about what is really happening or going to happen. So I'm going to play you this clip, and I'll talk about that a little bit more, about why employees fear change, why they don't like it, and they inherently are going to resist it, no matter how good intention they are. And so the reason we want to play the video is not only so you understand that dynamic, but more importantly, so you can understand how you can assess and dig into that and understand it and measure it, so that you can proactively anticipate it, so that ultimately you can come up with a change strategy that addresses it before it becomes a problem. So we're going to share all that with you here in this clip, and then we'll come back and talk about it. Before we dive too far into what people are typically feeling when they go through a digital transformation, it helps to first understand this basic truth in that most employees don't intentionally resist change. Now, a lot of organizations we talk to might think that they're intentionally resisting change, but what's really important to understand is that most employee resistance comes from a good place. It comes from the fact that they care. They want the business to be better. They want to be successful. They want to feel valued in the organization. And so on the surface, yes, they might be excited, and they probably are when you first start a project. But what happens inevitably throughout a digital transformation is what starts off as excitement and morale quickly drops off once they start to feel the pressure and start to feel the realities of how things are changing. So most resistance is unintentional. Yes, you might have a couple people, a small handful of people on your team that are just flat out trying to sabotage the project because they really don't want to change and they don't want to see you be successful. That's a whole nother conversation, and the change strategy you employ with those people are going to look a little bit different. But I'm talking about the 98, 99% of people within your organization. They probably mean well. They're not bad people. They're not trying to disrupt anything, but their fears, their uncertainties, and their doubts are what cause that unintentional resistance. And that's what I want to get to through the rest of this video. Most organizations we talk to, especially if they're midstream, if they have had problems in their implementation, or if the implementation isn't going well, most of those employees at those types of organizations express a feeling of chaos and confusion. And even for organizations that are managing their projects pretty well otherwise, they've got a clear strategy, they've got clear business processes, they pick the right tools and technologies for their transformation. Even in those cases, employees feel a certain amount of chaos and confusion. And that chaos and confusion is another form of unintentional resistance. So what typically starts off as excitement for a project quickly turns to low morale once the chaos and confusion enter the picture. And chaos and confusion comes from a lack of clarity. So if we don't have clarity around what our business processes are going to look like, how people's jobs are going to look like, how we're going to automate people's jobs and what they're going to do with that time that they free up, that's all chaos and confusion. That's all stuff that's going to scare people, and it's going to lead them to resist the change. No matter how good these people are, no matter how much they want to help the organization, they're inevitably going to start pushing back or resisting the project and resisting some of the changes that are coming down the pike. Imagine if I came to you and said, hey, guess what? We've got a brand new tool. It's going to make your job a lot easier. It's going to automate up to 60% of what you do every day. And on the surface, I'm excited as a leader because I'm thinking about the money I can save and how much more efficient you're going to be. But you are probably going to be a little scared by that, thinking, okay, that sounds cool, but what am I going to do with that 60% of the time that you're automating? Are you going to keep me? Are you going to get rid of me? Are you going to get rid of some of my peers? Inevitably, we start thinking about the worst case scenario, and we start questioning our own perceived value to the organization. Suddenly, this becomes more about cool new technology and less about me or you as a person, and that's perceived value is something that's really important to most employees. Another thing to be aware of is if you have anyone in your organization, and I think most of you can probably relate to this, but if you have anyone in your organization that has been around for a long time and has powered through despite broken processes and broken tools, they've used heroics to overcome the lack of tools and support that they've had. They've used pure heroics and talent to overcome those challenges to still do their job really well. Think about the perceived value that's going to go away, or the threat I'm going to feel if now you tell me technology is going to come in and take away those heroics, those things that I did to power through and to basically force myself to be successful and force us to be successful despite not having a great tool set to start with. Now suddenly what I value and take pride in my heroics now becomes somewhat of a liability. So now I'm afraid, and so what I've got to do as a leader is I've got to paint a picture for you of what we're going to do with that 60% of your time that we might be automating. But I also have to talk about how important you are and how important you combined with new technology is going to be. And I have to paint a picture of what that looks like. So back to my previous point about wanting to minimize chaos and confusion, this is another way we can minimize chaos and confusion while at the same time making sure that people still feel their value and are still perceived to be useful to the organization and to the leadership team. Another way employees are often feeling during digital transformation is change fatigued. They feel as though there's been so much change within the organization that they are tired of change, and at some point they tap out and they stop cooperating as much as they once did. For some organizations, they start off with the change fatigued employee base because they as an organization have gone through so much change. Maybe you've gone through a lot of growth, a lot of change, maybe you've had layoffs, maybe economic situations have changed the way you've operated, maybe you've acquired other companies. There's all these different changes that our employees are dealing with every day. And if now we throw a technology initiative or a digital transformation initiative on top of that, they're going to eventually break and become too tired to really support the projects the way we want them to. Even if you haven't had a lot of change leading up to your digital transformation, the digital transformation itself can cause change fatigue, especially for these long, multi-year, multinational projects, these big, massive projects. They can wear people down over time if they are constantly changing, and this becomes more of a risk when you're doing more of an incremental phased approach. On one hand, you're mitigating the risk of too much operational disruption because you're doing things incrementally and more of a phased approach, so it minimizes your risk on one hand, but on the other hand, you increase the risk of change fatigue because now the changes just seem to never stop. And the feeling of changes never stopping become even more pronounced when there's project delays, we go over budget, we end up randomly or quickly switching course on our strategy and direction. All those things are going to create change fatigue, which is a common challenge that employees are feeling during digital transformations. So what do we do about all this stuff? If our employees are concerned and they have these fears and doubts and uncertainties, what do we do about it? Well, the first thing we can do is define an organizational readiness approach where we assess the organization. We take a pulse or a temperature on the organization. And when we're helping our clients through this process, we'll use both a quantitative tool set and a qualitative tool set to analyze the culture, the areas of resistance, and the different temperatures at different parts of the organization so that we have almost a heat map of the organization to see what's red and more likely to cause resistance and what's green and what's more likely to be open to the change and what's somewhere in the middle, a yellow status. So that heat map really allows us to visualize and see where the resistance is coming from based on proven and repeatable, quantifiable, and qualitative tools that we use. Once we have that organizational assessment in place, now we can take those results and create a change strategy that's very prescriptive and surgical and focused on you as an organization and some of the results of that readiness assessment. So this is where we can create that change strategy to make sure that people feel better about this project and that they aren't tired and they're not scared and they're not resisting change. Instead, they're becoming part of the problem, part of the solution, and they're excited once again to move forward with the project, and they're excited for the possibilities of this digital transformation. So that was the clip from my YouTube channel where I talk about why employees hate change, and they don't always make it obvious. In fact, they usually don't make it obvious. It's usually invisible to the average person, especially the executives in the organizations. So what were some of your thoughts from seeing that video, Darian?
Yeah, I think that the video pointed out something that maybe a lot of people or a lot of executives don't want to confront, which is that, other people just simply may not be ready. And I think one thing that stuck with me the most is that oftentimes resistance can be unintentional because it's not like those are bad employees, but usually maybe executives haven't painted the full picture for them. And so how can you paint the full picture to kind of get more people on board and, get rid of that resistance?
Yeah, I mean, I think the sooner you can be clear about what the impacts are, then the better, because that resistance will come out. And I sometimes refer to it as the freak out moments. People are going to freak out once they realize, like, oh, wow, you're going to take away, the spreadsheet or this tool that I've become so comfortable with. I'm the only one that knows how to use it. And now you're telling me it's going to go away. So I'm going to have that freak out moment and you need to let me have it, so it's not a matter of necessarily avoiding it altogether. It's a matter of bringing it to the surface because it's below the tip of the iceberg. You got to bring it to the surface and deal with it head on, and it'll eventually go away. But the problem is most organizations don't see it until they get like to end user classroom training, for example. That's like the worst time to experience that is you're couple of weeks before go live, you're doing your final end user training to show them how to use the new tools and systems. and then they freak out because they're just now hearing for the first time that something major is changing in their job. And really, training should be not an afterthought, but it should be sort of a capstone to an ongoing change management journey. It should not be the only activity in your change plan. If you're relying on training to solve your problems, then you've severely underestimated change management. So you need to get all those freak out moments, all the clarity, all that stuff needs to happen way before end user training, so that by the time you get to end user training, there's no real surprises. I already know my job's changing. I know how it's changing. I know what my new role and responsibility is going to be. Now I just need to understand better how to do that within a new technology stack.
For sure. And one last kind of question here. Another thing that you called out was change fatigue. So people are maybe willing to change, but they're just like, oh my God, we just keep changing and changing and changing. Talk to me about what that kind of looks like on the ground for an organization.
Yeah, I mean, it's a balancing act, because there's one school of thought on one extreme that says just rip the Band-Aid off, do a big bang, just change everything all at once. And then there's another school of thought or another extreme that most companies, I think, lean this way, at least the companies we work with. They lean the other way, the other extreme, which is, well, let's do more incremental change to mitigate risk and to kind of ease into these changes. And that can mitigate the risk. I would not, for most companies, at least especially bigger companies, I would not recommend a big bang approach to where you just flip a switch and overnight your processes and your technologies are different, because it's just too much risk. I mean, you're putting your entire operations at risk when you do that. But on the flip side, if you take too long and it's too incremental, people are going to grow tired of that. It's just constant change. It's almost like death by 1,000 paper cuts. So you've got to find that balance somewhere in the middle, where you're being aggressive enough, but not so aggressive that it's disruption. And you're being incremental enough, but not so incremental that you're wearing people down and they're just tired of all the changes. I guess, the reality though, too, the caveat or the devil's advocate, being devil's advocate here to what I just said, is that things are changing so much as it is that you kind of have to change, and it's going to be incremental change, and people are going to get change fatigue either way. So you don't want to be too scared of it, but you do need to be mindful of the fact that there's a lot of change happening in the world and in most businesses and with technology. Now, when you throw on a digital transformation on top of that, that's just adding to changes that they're already experiencing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one big takeaway I had from this was, if an executive is listening to this or listening to the YouTube video, it's like they can take a step back and say, maybe my team isn't ready, and that's okay, and it's fixable. But only if you really, face that head on. So I thought that was a huge takeaway from the video overall.
Yeah, that was definitely the intent, and hopefully someone out there hears this and shares it with their executive team, because it is for executives, mid-level managers on up, I'd say, are the ones that need to hear that message the most, because again, they're usually the ones that are the furthest removed from what's actually happening on the ground. And that's why change management is so important, and that's why so many companies underestimate and underinvest in change management, is because they think they don't need it. And they think, well, other companies might need it, but we're good. I've talked to employees and they all seem excited. And that's probably true. They probably are excited on the surface, but you haven't gotten into the details of the change yet. And when you do, that's where they start to panic. So hopefully it helps someone out there avoid that pitfall. And you can also, by the way, if you go to the links below in the description of this podcast episode, you can download our guide to change management. That's a free guide. You can download, free resource that'll allow you to learn more about change management, how to mitigate some of these strategies. Mitigate. I feel like that could be a word that I just made up. It's kind of cool. Has a good ring to it, even though I messed that up. But you want to mitigate those changes. And so that guide will help you. We also have the guide to AI strategy and implementation. So if you back to the conversation with Khalid, if you want to learn more about AI and how to deploy a strategy within your organization related to AI, be sure to check out that guide. I've included links to that below as well. So thanks for being here today again, Darian. Nice job on today's episode. And thank you to the audience for all the great questions. Thank you to Khalid Morris for being here. You can find new episodes of the show every Wednesday, transformationgroundcontrol.com. You can also see past episodes at transformationgroundcontrol.com. Feel free to reach out to me if you'd like to learn more about Third Stage and how we can help you with your digital transformation initiatives. Love to chat with you, even if it's informally, to brainstorm ideas. So feel free to reach out. My contact information is below. So I hope you all have a great day. We'll see you next week on the next episode of Transformation Ground Control. Take care.